So, from my angle, I think these are few points with regard to the submission of the response to the examination report. And secondly, that the response you should file this particular examination report uh, to the examiner so that quite well in advance, so that he can now, he has sufficient time to read. Sometimes, suppose you submit the response at the last minute, so there might be they might be in hurry to dispose of that application, and because now they have a some kind of fixed number of cases to be done, so they might miss. I'm not saying they are missing all. They might miss the important argument which you have submitted, because that is a time bound matter. So I think that there should be a sufficient time to be given to the examiner for considering the response to the FAR.
So, as regards the amendments are concerned, if you could maybe throw some light on, because we see some variance in terms of how different controllers interpret Section 59, what kind of added matter can be sort of put in from the specification to the claims, and some controllers don't allow any addition at all if it was not in the as filed claim set. And therefore, if you could maybe throw your perspective on maybe what the right practice should be with respect to the implementation of Section 59 and inclusion of limitations and or subject matter from the spec, which was not there in the claims earlier, sir.
So, with regard to amendment under Section 59, as you know, the Section 59 clearly says that what kind of amendment can be allowed. This can be the explanation, and then correction of some errors and all, and maybe the disclaimer. So most of the controllers and examiner, they understand disclaim means you have already claimed it, but out of those claims you are going to drop certain claims. That is what their feeling is, and that is how they go by the amendments. So while amending the claims especially, you have to see that it is the amendments do not go beyond the scope of the invention what has been disclosed. That means this should not be a new matter, but it does not mean that you cannot reconstruct the claim. I would like to say the reconstruct in the sense that that claim, the features which are already there in the specification, and somehow they were missing in the claims. So those claims you can reconstruct. As far as I am concerned, I have allowed many, because the reconstructing of the claims of the features which are already there in the specification. The applicant is not going beyond the scope of the invention which has been disclosed, which has been filed by the applicant in the patent office. So the disclosure is already there, but now you are reconstructing the claim. You are not claiming let us see, there were 30 claims. Now amendments, you have reduced them 25 or 20, let us say. But there were some features which you feel they were left out. So again, I feel that those features, if you want to claim, you can reconstruct the claim and add that. But mostly the examiner will go by the number. That earlier the 30 claims were there. Now you are adding 31 claims. Maybe they might be thinking that no, this is not allowed, and because what you can do, you can disclaim. The disclaim recently, I think the new lot of the controllers recently promoted. Although we had trained them, but I think of late I have come to the feeling that they are not allowing any new claim, addition of new claim.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I think that the, 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 the point which I am trying to say, that what kind of amendments are allowed under section 59, one should keep it in mind. The three kind of amendments, the focus should be there. And fourth one, that those amendments, based on the kind of amendments are allowed section 59, um, then they should not go beyond the scope of the invention which has been disclosed in the patent specification. So that is what I would like to say about section 59.
So what would you say about an example where the earlier original set of claims, just as a hypothetical example, I know it varies on a number of parameters, but if the initial claim set had three elements A, B, C, and then the specification did talk about another element D, but it was never claimed in the original set. And the applicant, during maybe the response to the examination report, includes element number D, which is an independent element, but is in addition to A, B, C, and that D sort of brings in the desired novelty, but was never there. And it is neither a correction, neither a further explanation of ABC, neither is it a disclaimer. How would you react to it in personal capacity if I were to ask your opinion, sir?
Uh, you see, it depends, like if there are ABC features in the claim. Now, let us suppose the examiner has come out with the prior art, prior art having ABC features, So then what option applicant has? Because all the features are already cited by the examiner.
Sure.
When then you feel at that point of time, you can, I feel personally that you can bring that D features to make it novel, and saying that no, this is also one of the features of the invention. That time we wanted to claim the broad invention, So although this particular features may be there or may not be there, we were claiming the broad inventions. But since the examiner has come out with the prior art, so just to make it novel, you can always bring that kind of feature which was already there in the specification, already disclosed in the specification. I think that time when the prior art has cited all three features, at that point of time, I think it will be, I personally feel that D features can be brought into the claim.
So what about the timing of the response, which was the second point on the agenda today? As regards, a lot of applicants come to us and ask us whether they should file the response, say, in the second month or towards the end of 6 months. And they also ask us what is the likelihood of a second examination report being issued if they file the response too early. So what is your recommendation on the timing? If the applicant can file it, if he is ready with the response in the first month, should he file for in the first month, or should he wait till the fourth month and perhaps, file it then?
You see, nowadays the concept of second examination almost, I think, zero down. I mean, it's almost very negligible. In very few cases, I think only few controllers are issuing second examination report. Although there is no written, order, or there is no law also about whether the second response should be given or not. There's nothing like that. But though you feel that, so the second examination report issued by the examiner only when there is sufficient time to communicate and you have a sufficient time to respond. So if you feel that your response, I think, quite clear and to the point, I think my suggestion would be to give at least 2 months time to the examiners to study. At least, so 2 months, like 6 months time is there. So at least if you file a response, at least 2 months before the last date, that will be, I think, good. Because when these responses are submitted to the office, they might already have some cases. So at least they should get 2 months time to study each of the case. Why I say so? Because if they have a good enough time to study, it is quite possible that you have less objections. But their time is less with the examiner. You might see that there may be some second examination or maybe a hearing later with a lot of objections. So if they get time, in many cases, if you have noticed, even without hearing also they have accepted when there is a time and the response is nicely prepared. You neither get the second examination report nor any hearing notice. There are certain cases where without any hearing, the cases are accepted.
Sure. So there was also a concern by a lot of our applicants that we have filed the response to the examination report, say in 2016, and we are sitting in 2020 or in 19, or it has taken 2 years since the response, but no hearing notice has been issued, neither a decision has been issued. And when we follow up sometimes with the controllers, they're not fond of that follow up because they sort of feel as if it's putting additional pressure on them and there is a defined pipeline. Can anything be done by the applicant or the agent in such cases when it's been 2 years or so since the response to the FER was filed and nothing has happened, sir?
Yes, I know that kind of things happen, and now also there are certain I mean a lot of cases pending for I mean old cases are pending. Actually, what happened, when few years back, if you notice, the the focus of the examiner mainly was to dispose and to increase the examination report. So examination report, when number of examiners were more, so suppose in 2012 we recruited around 400 examiners. Then again 2016 we recruited around 459, 460 patent examiners, and in 2018 also we appointed around 200 examiners. So the situation was that since 2012 the examiners were more, the controllers were less. So that means the examination report issued compared to the final disposal, obviously when the final disposal is done by the controllers, not by the examiner, where the first examination report, although issued by the controller, but more or less the applications are examined by the examiner. So when the new examiners started coming since 2012, the number of first examination report increased tremendously. And now if the controllers are not available to that proportion, now currently we have around one controller have 4 examiners, So suppose one examiner examined 15 cases, first examination report. So here around 60 examination report issued, and similarly 60 or 30 amended cases, So that is how the controller has to, minimum work has to do. So out of 60, if he only disposes 30, so what are the remaining? The 30 cases of pendency every month he is piling it up, So my point was that this ratio of examiner 1:4, controller, I think it should be further reduced so that the disposal can also be increased. So that is the reason why we have gone to that stage of when 2016 FER response, although filed well in advance, but not yet disposed that application. I think now recently, I think last 1 year, there have been a lot of promotions at the post of the controller, not examiner.
Right.
Because earlier focus was on the recruitment of examiner, but now the focus shifted to the promotion to the controller. So when the controllers number are increasing, certainly their disposal will also increase. And that situation certainly will be, further improve with their functioning. And now the number of, now in the lockdown period also, you must have noted that there are a lot of hearing going on. But when I was there, I said only hearing should be conducted only where there are obvious dispute which you feel that cannot be, or where you feel that this can be accepted, or there are certain serious objections. In most of the cases, then only I think one should conduct hearing. Otherwise, for small things like even if amendment, I say that the amendment, that the Act provide power to the controller to propose amendment. You can communicate to the applicant, no, these are the few amendments. If you can do it, I can go ahead and accept the patent application. So that kind of powers are there. Control has power to correct clerical errors, small amendments, just to, but they have to communicate to the applicant. But I feel at this stage, I have to be very frank with you, most of the controllers are not exercising that power.
But from a follow-up standpoint, would you recommend that the applicant aggressively follows up or the agent does it, or would you rather state that it would not make any difference and the pipeline would remain as is, and it would? What would your recommendation be, just so that we can inform the clients better of whether it would make sense for us to aggressively follow up for the applications to be disposed of, sir?
You know, when I was in office, I used to receive at least around 50 to 60 emails every month, every day about the follow-up. And I used to forward it to the concerned controller and examiner. But you know, their position was also different. But I feel this kind of follow action or something like that, I think it should be taken with the controller general office like that. Why so much pendency is there? So that they can plan it in a better way. They can come out with the better solutions, you know. It is not a case of one controller or two controller, three controller. It is a controller as a whole. I think the controller general office can come up with certain practice like that, like in trademark. Earlier, every trademark application there were objection, but I think there were hardly any application where without any objection the trademark application is going for acceptance, you know. But when we saw that there are a lot of piling up, these objection once raised, and then they will take 2-3 years to again conduct hearing and so many things. But now they have changed the practice. So now the pendency has gone down. So similarly, if you feel that there is a pendency of old cases growing up, one or two cases, okay, individual controller, one you can take up with them. That we conducted hearing long back, so I think you need to pursue that. But too much persuasion again, maybe suppose the case is very old, and then sometime I feel, to be honest, the controller might feel offended, something like that. But every time he is pointing my mistake, although it is his mistake, but in the government,
Nobody
hardly accept their mistake. There are very few people they accept their mistake. So aggressive, follow up when only when the number of cases are less with the individual controller would be good. But when the issue is at large, is same everywhere, I think it's better to always take up such kind of issues with the office of the controller general, so they can come up with certain things and and they come out with solution to resolve this kind of issues. Yeah.
Sir, on the hearing side, if you could just tell how should an applicant or an agent prepare for the hearing? What are some of, like you mentioned in the, like you very aptly mentioned in while responding to the examination reports, you have to keep it concise, make it tabular, make it clear, make it very short. No point of writing 15-page responses and no need of citing case laws at the time of responses and stuff like that. Similarly, if you could maybe throw some preferred practices when we are going for the hearing physical or over the VC, some way that you think that the controllers would feel more comfortable giving opportunities for amendments or any other thing for that matter, sir.
So I think hearing and response to the examination report, I think more or less same. The hearing, first when you get the hearing notice, you study the objection what he has raised in the hearing letter, and you should prepare. I feel first you prepare the response before attending the hearing, and then highlight certain things, like he said there is lack of inventive step, and you highlight why there is no lack of inventive step. As I said, there's a tabulation. Then if you can bring out the features and explain to him, I think that will be a better way of explaining to the controller. And later on, you can amend those submissions also when you submit within 15 days or so, whatever time they have given. But I feel before going for a hearing, you must prepare the response, a draft response, and highlight those points what he has raised. Suppose if there is issue of lack of novelty, then you highlight that this is a novelty, and because these things are missing in the cited document. And similarly, in case of inventiveness, you highlight why this is inventive, why it is not obvious to a person skilled in the art, and nobody, even person skilled in the art, would not have thought of similar solution had he given the opportunity also. So I think point-wise response is better, the point to point, and not paragraph to paragraph. So once you highlight those points to him, I think it will be easy for him to understand and take a decision on the matter quickly.
So as regards when we're making such submissions, either in the response or in the hearing reply, notice reply, we and when we are arguing in front of the controller as well, we also get to hear that similar Indian applications that they've been granted and citing them as examples of the fact that another controller in another jurisdiction or in the same jurisdiction granted a similar application does not really hold any water, because every controller has his own way of looking at it. So how is there a way that we can, because we rely on case laws all over, we also rely on subject matters, we rely on a lot of other stuff, but then we come to similar applications which have been granted, that line of argument doesn't get accepted by most controllers. So anything that we can do to maybe harmonize the practice better?
I think the manual, the guidelines of manual are important than the citing the previously accepted application. There are certain controllers. When the case was, I saw in the past when the practice was that earlier the practice was that the case was put in order for acceptance, and later on patent was granted. Many of the junior controller, when the senior man put it in order, there is further objection in that. But the practice should have been that the controller who has put it in order for acceptance, let us go by that opinion, because we must have some experience in the field, and that is how he must have put it. But many new controllers started raising a fresh objection. Then we train them that when you have not given any opportunity of, then the raising fresh objections, I think doesn't sound good. So now these kind of things are, they have come down quite drastically. But I feel again there's a feeling in the controller that I am an independent controller. I can't go by the opinion of other controllers. But what then? When the guidelines of examination, the manual of examination, which is carrying uniformity of the practice, I think that will be the most ideal thing to quote rather than citing the previously accepted application. Especially these kind of things happen in the software related patent application. You must have noticed that the one office has accepted, the other office is rejecting that application, refused. So in 3K cases, the people think that my interpretation about the system is much better than the other one. So the citing of the decision is good. But may not be just accepted application. I think not enough.
So from a 3D, 3K standpoint, if you could throw some light beyond the regular parlance of how we overcome 3D, for example, by showing synergistic data, and 3K obviously again by citing a host of case laws and trying to find out portions from our specification which illustrate some sort of technical effect or some sort of scientific technical character in the invention. Anything which are some soft some soft suggestions from your side on how 3K and 3D need to be sort of handled apart from the usual arguments that are in place, sir?
About 3K, I think there is so far there is no uniform practice established, because even despite our guidelines which are issued for CRI related inventions, uh, the recent court case of Delhi High Court, when they have remanded back the case to the patent office with certain observations of these kind of innovations. Now, when there is a technical contribution, should be considered for patent. So it will, to be very frank, it will take time, still take time to understand that. But I feel there's a need uh, of the Controller General Office to issue guidelines. Now, suppose in most of the countries, when the Supreme Court issues certain decisions, immediately the changes are made in the examination guidelines or manuals, whatever they have. So they have a lot of impact. So just to avoid, divergence opinion of the individual controllers, I think this guideline should be amended immediately when the superior court issues certain guidelines or made some observations. But that has not been done by the office after Delhi High Court decision. So still left with the individual controller to consider that case. Uh, because I always felt our law, all like regarding inventive step, there is already a technical, contribution or advancement. So that terminology are already there in the act itself. Why should they not accept those kind of inventions? Especially now, AI, artificial intelligence, there are a lot of, inventions are taking place. So they have to change, certain, when the High Court or Supreme Court, they come out with certain decisions and recommendations, I think the CG office immediately should take note of it and issue modified guidelines. This particular examination guidelines are amended page number so and so, something like that, so that uniformity and the court observations are taken into account while examining those inventions. But that has not happened, and I think there is no one to suggest also like that. All the senior controllers, they have retired, so the young guys, they don't feel to communicate to the Controller General of Office that there is a need to streamline that. But I think attorney group, they can write to the controllers, Controller General, to take note of the decision and incorporate appropriately in the guidelines, so that those observations are taken care of and they are respected by the office. I don't know what has happened after that. I just heard. I have not yet checked. Even after High Court guidelines, that application is whether is accepted by the controller or not.
No, so it was refused. That application
So that is
after that.
right. So that kind of individual interpretation. When the court observations are made, and that too, with a futuristic approach, and considering, those approaches based on the law, when your law defines technical advancement, I think they should be respected by the office, and there should be a uniformity, and it should not be left. Such an important point, it should not be left to the individual controller to interpret the law.
Because the difficulty is even more because of the fact that hearing is almost the last verdict for us, because after that, if the application gets refused, you are sitting at the IPAB where for the last 8-9 years, nothing really has happened. So that's the last opportunity in a way with from our side, and it's with one controller. And sometimes there is the hearing notice only objects on the system claims and not on the method claims. And in another similar case, we see completely an opposite stand being taken where they say that the method claims will not be allowed and you can retain your system claims. So there is so much of disharmony in terms of the stands taken by different controllers that keeps the whole makes the whole difficult. Had the IPA been as active in terms of the fact that they were deciding on these appeals in 6 to 8 months, I think things would have been far more concrete by now, sir.
Yeah, I fully agree and endorse your views because now, but hopefully, I think yesterday some orders are issued on the technical members of patent, copyright, trademark, and so I think they are going to join very soon, and I hope the IPAV functions fully. But anyway, because it is easier to, to take a decision on the patent office than going to the court, and because IPAV and the High Court both are all burdened. But it is easier to take a decision. My submission, my point, I used to tell them that the case should be refused only when there is no scope of acceptance, when there are serious objection which cannot be cured, then only this should be the last, right. So as long as the applicant is able to explain, he is able to explain to you, or he has submitted the argument, and then based on the observations and submissions made by the applicant, he should take a positive approach for me. I used to tell them that the patent office, the examiner controllers are appointed to grant the patent, grant the patent. But there are refusal if they are not meeting the requirement of the law. You can always refuse them. But there should not be undue injustice, undue. I think so you can understand what is undue. So somebody is when all the objections are complied with, all your objections are taken place just because the applicant was not is not a very polite person, or he must have hurt your feeling. There are some people in the space, I feel they take different kind of approach. अच्छा इनको अभी कुछ सिखाना है, something like that.
Right.
So only individual, not I'm telling you all, but only one or two, some people are there. But majority is good, and I think with the further training, I think they will also be improved. My feeling is that when there is some important court cases by High Court or maybe Supreme Court, I think immediately we should change our guidelines or manuals accordingly to update all entire patent examiners and controller, and it should not be left to the individual controller's interpretation. Sometimes individual controller interpretation good when there is a positive outcome. When there is a positive outcome interpretation, individual controller can come out with that. But just there should not be a pre-assumption that नहीं ये तो केस मारना ही है, कुछ भी हो, चाहे whatever argument you give, but that kind of thing should not be there. Now the people are changing.
No, very good. So last question from my side before we take the questions from the colleagues who have joined in. Divisional applications has also been for the last many years a point of contention where, if, for example, if a patent application, which sort of eventually will be the parent application, has about 10 claims, and then there was another set of invention or another set of claims that were not claimed in the main primary application, the parent application, but is filed as a divisional application later. It was very well supported by the spec, but was not there in the originally filed claim set. Now, there is a lot of dispute around that fact also, where when we file the divisional applications, the controllers are of the opinion that because these divisional claims were not a part of your parent application, we will not accept them as part of the divisional, even if they were well supported by the spec. So that's one way of looking at it. And some applicants and some agents have obviously then tried to overcome that by adding the claims during the parent application itself as a new set, and then deleting them voluntarily, saying that there is no unity, and then taking those claims to the divisional claims. What is your stand on such claims which are unclaimed in the parent application but well supported in the spec for them to be filed as a successful divisional application, sir?
Tarun, actually, long back, one decision issued by me. I don't know some application. If you can go find out. My observation was the objective of filing of the divisional application is to divide the invention, but not to revive the invention. So that is what my understanding was. So whatever number of claims which are claimed in the parent application, if out of those claims they are distinct, some of the claims are distinct, you can file a divisional application. But in the divisional application which were not claimed earlier, if you want to file a divisional application, I think that may not sound well, because you are going to revive certain things which were not originally claimed. So that was my stand, and same if you look at the IPAB decision, Mr. Parmar, he used the same wording. When you are as a technical member, the purpose of the objective application, the divisional application is to divide, not revive. The same words were used by him when he first decided the issue of divisional application. So my suggestion is that let the same claim may be there, but whatever the distinct claims are there, you should divide those claims only.
Right. And what about the other approach that I talked about, where those claims are added in the parent application and then eventually then voluntarily deleted, maybe either after the examiner in the parent application raises a unity objection or voluntarily? What would you feel about that approach, or would you say that that was done with some malintent?
My suggestion would be that you file the application as filed in the original main application, but delete those claims which are now accepted in the main application. The remaining claims, my suggestion is this.
So then I will go to the questions right away, and we'll open it up for people to ask it orally, but there are a few questions on the chat box. Zubair has asked whether the PCT national phase claims, because when we were talking about Amendment 1059, are they treated somewhere differently? Because to me they don't, but is there some difference with respect to amendments being done to claims that come through a national phase into India compared to the originally Indian filed application?
I think as long as the amendments are within the purview of Section 59, they should not be treated differently.
So Aditya then talks about, could you ask sir about views about product by process claims? I mean, general views that you might just want to spare in a minute, sir. What would you say about product by process?
It has to be decided by the applicant, what he wants. He wants the product independently or product by process. The product by process has a very limited scope, so it is a choice of the applicant what he wants actually. So on this issue, I think I have nothing to say, but they are not refused. I mean, product-based process are not refused, but the applicant has to understand whether he wants product independently or product by process.
So then Garrick, Mr. Ghosh has asked Dr. Kardam, do you do the past IPAB judgments and the controller decisions under Section 15 have persuasive value to the IPO while deciding FER? IPAB decisions would, but as we said, as we were discussing, Section 59 decisions may not really have a bearing.
As I said during earlier my discussion, the citing of other controller decisions sometimes not good, because the controller think that no, I have a much better understanding than previous controller, maybe like that. But always the IPAB decisions are binding, not just persuasive, but it's not just persuasive, they are binding on the patent office. So the citation of IPAB judgment is very much relevant. I think the focus should be to cite more and more IPAB judgment just because the IPAV did not work for much longer time. I mean, I think now it's going to function. I mean, our 2 years gap or so. So I expect a lot of cases now, judgment to come out, but always cite the decisions which have judicial value. So the controller is not a judicial person. So maybe some controller might accept or some controller may not, because it has no judicial value. It's only semi-judicial kind of thing. But IPAV and court decisions are judicial decisions, and they are not just persuasive. They have the binding on the controller. So they are always good to cite actually.
Munish Arora asks, where he says that sometimes they see controllers' objections on the use of the term at least or comprising or one or more, greater than, smaller than, and so on and so forth. There is no standard on such things, and it is again controller specific. Anything that you would suggest here as regards what?
They are a small thing, actually very difficult to bind the controller actually, So although they hardly matters, but sometimes like there are certain issues like consisting of and all, and the foreign practices in the claims as claim in accordance with the claim, something like that, wherein the Indian practice as claimed. So there may be some practice difference, but I don't think it matters a lot. But just for for their satisfaction, I think you can amend that, because they sometimes at least means you can understand that it has a scope. So it depends from individual to individual. I have allowed, at least in many of my cases, and I have also allowed about this thing. I have not gone for a fixed percentage or fixed things. It really depends on controllers to controller. I think there's no guidelines on such kind of things also. So some flexibility. Sometimes they feel happy if you have accepted their suggestion, and the ego may be satisfied. So I think we should not bother much about that. Whatever they say, you do it, unless it is going to affect your inventions seriously. Why? If you change these words, it might affect the scope. It might affect the area of protection. As long as they do not affect, I think there should not be any problem in just agreeing to that.
Siddharth asks, we can keep the questions very quick now that we have quite a few questions coming up. So Siddharth asks, sometimes during the hearing, there are new objections that come, and therefore should the agent at that moment press for another hearing?
During the hearing, there are certain new objections.
Yeah.
I think to be very ideal, there should not be any new objection during the hearing, or even the hearing notices also. But anyway, when the objections are new, you can ask for the adjournment. When there are certain new points or new issue raised by the controller, you can always request that since this particular objection was not communicated in the hearing notice or previously, you can ask for adjournment, that we need to have some time to examine this issue. And then I think then if he understands that this is a new issue raised by the controller or by him, I think he should consider your request for adjournment. But normally, new issues should not be raised at this stage.
So one interesting question coming from Dilip. We've considered this quite a few at our end as well. What about filing review petitions versus appeals? What is your take on review petitions, because it goes to the same controller, and how successful are they, and what are the chances really of sort of actually getting some amendments to be done and getting the case allowed after that?
Uh, you know that review has limited scope, you know, review of the decision. So compared to challenging or appeal in the IPAB. So in the appeal, you can appeal the decision entirely on all the grounds, whatever grounds you have. But as far as review is concerned, this has very limited scope, that whether the controller has left out any important point, you know, which you argued. I mean, there's a error obvious on the face of the record, you know, which has occurred in the decision. Some important point he has lost, which are not considered in the decision, although you have submitted during the hearing, also in the written statement. So I came across recently that there was one controller, he gave a decision. In the decision, he cited a prior art which was not relevant at all. This was not relevant. It was a different field of technology. But still, he refused that case. So this is a error on the face of record because the citation is entirely different. I think in such case, the review is good because it is easy and it takes less time compared to the court or IPME where there will be regular hearing as per the procedure laid down in their rules. So when you feel that there is a error, obvious error on the face of the record, or there are certain important points which were not considered, which are not highlighted in your in the decision of the controller, but you submitted them before the controller. I think if these are the circumstances, then the review is better option. But the finding of the controller based on your decisions are different or not favorable. I think they should you go for appeal or writ petitions.
Sir, quite a few people have talked about have been asking about biological inventions on patentability or national phase entry of biological inventions. They don't have a question per se, but maybe if you could want to throw some light on how biological inventions are being treated these days, or any fine pointers on that, sir.
Biological invention, I mean, there is no difference in the treatment of application regardless to their subject, like whether they are biological or whether they are pharmaceutical or even they are mechanical. The criteria are same. I mean, just there are different requirements. You know, like biological cases, you need to. Is there any deposition of microorganism or other kind different requirement? Whether there is a requirement of biodiversity act. These are the distinct issues as compared to the normal field of technology like pharmaceutical or mechanical or electronic. So biological inventions have certain additional requirement compared to others. But as far as the interpretation is concerned, I think it's same. There's no difference in that.
Sir, I have 33, 35 more questions. The questions are coming up. So we are above 12 o'clock. So please feel free to let me know, Tarun, that I have answered enough questions and I'll stop right there. But otherwise, I'll keep on answering those questions.
One or two questions you can still ask, no problem.
Sure,
For
sir.
me, I have no problem.
Sure, sir. So there is a question from Anshuri, Anushri, which also again says that what is your advice to deal with objections in the hearing notice, which are never raised in the FER or in further official action? I think you've already answered that, but I think anything else you might want to add, we can take care of.
Whatever I said, I think that is already I have answered. I think this question.
Right, sir. I'm just thinking of any new questions that are coming in, sir. These are long questions, so.
There's one question regarding introduction of the interview with the examiner. Interview with the examiner, Syed Bukhari.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So earlier this concept was there that to have a interview with the examiner, you know. But now the interview with the examiner, hardly matters because now the decision is taken by the controller, So most of when you attend the hearing, that is also a part of the interview kind of thing and discussion. Many people after explain everything during the hearing, they understand and they take a decision, a favorable decision when they understand. But the number of examiners are increasing day by day. So although there is a concept in US there is but they are paid services. When you want to discuss with the examiner, the USPTO put some charges. But here there is no charge, and the efficiency of the examiner, because he has to do the examination new cases also besides discussing the amended case. So now that too we don't know whether the decision taken by the examiner will be acceptable to the controller or not. Depends on their relations, how they are cordial relation, they accept it, but they are, and more so because now this concept will not work. Why? Because nowadays there is a cross-location examination, cross-location examination. Earlier it would have worked because the examiner and controller are at the same location. You can go and interview, and after discussion with the examiner, you can always go to the controller. That is what we have finalized. But today we don't know. The control examiner sitting in Chennai, and suppose you are a attorney from Chennai, you discuss with the examiner, but ultimately the final decision will be taken by the controller, who may be sitting at Kolkata or Mumbai. He may agree or may not agree. So this concept of interview in the current situation will not work.
Kardam sir, was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so very much for excellent insight into so many topics. Questions keep coming. Siddharth, Yamini, my sincere apologies that we may not be able to take more time of Dr. Kardam, but surely we'll try to get another session with him sometime. And thank you, Dr. Kardam. Was a sincere pleasure.
So much. My pleasure was mine. I really enjoyed this discussion in this particular session, and I also look forward anytime, any field, I will be always available. No problem.
That's wonderful. That's so kind of you, sir. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Kardam. Thank you, everybody, for joining in and sparing your time for an hour plus. Sincere thanks to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kardam, again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
See you.
Have a nice day.
Bye.